Hey, Vinny.
We have a very special guest.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to open the meeting, if we could. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the public meeting to order. Item number 2, public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. Any such? Jackie, can you please? The green X on the floor.
Where should I stand?
The green X on the floor over there works well.
Oh, yes. I'm distressed by the prolonged idling of the diesel engines on the Bennett's Cove Road. Today it was over an hour. And I'm requesting some no idling signs. After all, there is a state law. And just by way of current events, when I left my home at 5:30ish, there were 9 trucks all the way up the hill, waiting.
Thank you. Any other comments for items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move along to the town administrator and other town reports. Mika?
Good evening, everybody. No, I didn't think it was. Thank you. So TA report, the first thing on it is committee members needed. Planning board, Board of Adjustment, and Board of Adjustment Appeals are really the two that we are in dire need of board members. There's only 3 board members on each committee. Planning board, as of right now, that we know of, has at least 6, probably closer to a dozen things that they're gonna have to see between now and the end of the summer. There's a lot of short line restoration projects that have gone to DEP that are gonna be coming down their pipe. There are things relative to the library, some town grants. So there is a lot of work that the planning board has ahead of them. It would be great if they could use some assistance in having another board member or 2. Right now, there's only 3 of them. People are very eager to have their applications be seen and be heard. If we can't get 3 people to have a quorum, then it just delays the entire process. And so we are seeing that firsthand with the planning board right now. They're just stretched really thin. So if anybody knows anybody that is willing to be on either of the boards, that would be great. Both of the boards do have some requirements relative to who can and cannot be on those boards, but any additional help would be greatly appreciated. Town meeting is coming up June 7th at 9 a.m., followed by elections, which this year we only have local elections, which is 2 seats for select board and 2 seats for school board. That will take place on June 10th at the hall. The next thing is just a brief update of victualers and special amusement. So this is something that typically the select board sees right about this time of year for approval, due to the fact that a lot of the places, such as the Inn and the Slow Bell, the Niblick, are delayed in their opening. Therefore, the fire chief can't do the inspections until it's closer to the opening time. So it's just delaying the process for when the select board has those licenses in front of them. But it is something that is going to be in front of the board in June. Through these conversations, the fire chief, the code enforcement officer, and myself are going to sit down and revisit the ordinances and the time frame that is associated around it, and most likely come up with some proposal to bring in front of the select board to bring forth to a future town meeting to make some changes. And more or less, it's really to just make the process more efficient, because right now, we are expected to follow our own ordinances. These licenses expire at the end of May. A lot of these operations aren't coming into being running and established until into June, and so it's too early for the fire chief to do inspections on facilities that aren't fully able to be an operational matter, and so it's just delaying the process. So if we make some minor adjustments and suggestions, it might streamline the process a little bit better and also make it so the code enforcement officer and the fire chief are more in sync with what the process is.
Vika, can they open before they receive their license, or is the inspection happen once they're
So the current licenses are valid through the end of May. It's really pending on the inspections to make sure that they're safe, and then the fire chief provides that information to us, and then we provide that to the select board, and the select board makes a motion and has the final say. So technically, no, they shouldn't be opening. With the places that are delayed are places that aren't opening until after the May 30th anyways. And so we, rather than the fire chief going ahead and doing inspections ahead of time and calling it good, we're intentionally delaying the process so then the inspection could be as close to them being ready to open as possible, so then that way they are up to date.
But we need to have a meeting to approve it?
So you see the applications and you make a vote on, it's on the select board part, I would say it's a fairly simple process. It's more or less that the code enforcement officer and the fire chief are in good communication and have things squared away that way to make sure that all the sprinkler systems are operating, the alarms and things like that. And I support the fire chief in not doing it weeks in advance ahead of the opening. So these will be in front of you hopefully within the next 2 weeks for the next meeting. Some of them might be a little bit later once, I know he's got several inspections lined up this week for a lot of these places.
Okay, thank you.
FEMA status. So on the town part, we have done everything that we can do to submit the process from the 2024 damages. There was a delay and then some from the federal government. We did finally get the final notice from MEMA to let us know that they've awarded us the disaster assistance. I did follow up and was told that by the end of this month, we should be receiving our funds. And with the federal share, we're anticipating a little over $1.4 million in funds that we are, at this point, fully anticipated to receive. It's just a matter of when the check arrives. I did have some communication with the FEMA representative, and we have submitted and finalized the numbers in terms of the municipal time and efforts that were put as a result of these disasters. And based on that, hopefully, it'll probably be an additional couple of months before we see anything. There'll be about an additional $70,000 and change that will be coming our way as a result of that too. So good news, once we get the money, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable about some of these pending projects, so to speak, that we have. We're hoping to get some of this money, but I will definitely keep the board informed when we receive those checks. Any questions so far? The next thing is floats and moorings. So by now, most people have seen that the floats have been installed. People are purchasing tie-up stickers. The mooring process, the town did switch mooring companies, and the mooring system that we're using is going to be the same system that all of the local towns use. So people are going to be, if they have moorings in other local towns such as Yarmouth, they'll be familiar with the process. It has taken the company a little bit longer to transfer all of the data from the old system onto the new system. People should be receiving emails shortly about getting their moorings paid and having those applications sent out. It is about a month later than anticipated, but it really doesn't have a major impact in terms of whether we'll receive the funds or anything like that. So it's just more or less letting you know of that process, and that emails should be going out soon to individual people to let them know of the mooring applications and the payments due. So. And then the last thing I have on here is the town has been awarded $86,000 in a grant for the Community Wildlife Protection Plan. This is the joint effort with Long Island, and big thank you to Carol, who played a big role in making that happen. Once again, we've signed the contract. We have not yet received the money. I'll keep the board informed when that happens. So.
Any questions?
For the TA report, yes, I do have one thing that I'll mention under other business that I'm hoping to get a motion from you for.
Okay. All right, moving on. Interesting, we have other, okay. We're gonna cross out item 4, business, and do regular business. I should say regular business, I guess, yeah. Okay. Item 25-027, to approve and sign the FY26 town warrant. There's a copy of the town warrant in the packet. It has been put together by Vika and crew and reviewed and edited and approved by the town attorney, Ben McCall. Vika, anything to say about the warrant beyond that?
Nope, so the school portion of things was approved by the school town attorney. I compiled everything else. Ben had, when I sent this to him, this was the most red marked version I received back, which I was happy to see because that means he was thoroughly paying attention to it. And then rather than me reading back through it, I had Krista go through it thoroughly, and she actually was able to pick up a couple other small little tweaks. So I'm hoping that this has no mistakes in it whatsoever, and it's about as final as it can get. And so at this point, we just need the board to approve it, sign it, and then we will be within the time frame to have it advertised before town meeting.
All right. Any questions, comments, discussion from the board?
Well, as a new member of the select board, looking at, appreciating just how much work this takes for so many people was very insightful. So thank you and well done, everyone.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the warrant as it exists in the packet?
All right, I'll make a motion. Never make motions. I make a motion to approve and sign the fiscal year 26 town warrant. Do I give the number 25-027 or
No.
we're just good to go?
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Motion on the floor, is there a second? Second, by Richard, all right. And any discussion from the board on the motion? Any comments from the public, questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Not seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. All right, moving forward to item 25-028, to hear an update on Venice Cove relative to barging, the GEI report, which is in the packet, requests that have been made about
No, it isn't.
This GI report.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, sorry, I was getting the two GI reports confused. To mention that, I think that there is a GEI report, right?
For South Shore Drive, correct?
Yeah. So the GEI report mentioned in 25-028, what is that referring to?
So GEI is working on an application to submit to the state of Maine
Right.
relative to the permit or for the submerged,
Okay.
yeah. And so people have been asking what the status of that. We've had
Right,
received
okay.
an email.
So it's an update on that. Gotcha.
Yeah, just a brief update with where things stand.
Also, it says planks in here. I think that refers to various requests that have been made by people on the island and contractors regarding the planks that were temporarily in place. And also to talk about culvert replacement and take any necessary action now that we have all the survey information and that kind of thing. So, Mika, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I can provide a brief update about each of the different items, and then if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to provide some answers. So, relative to the GEI report, there were some communications recently because some were under the impression that the town had submitted or GEI had already submitted. So GEI was hired to fill out a permit to the state of Maine on the behalf of the town of Shebig for submerged planks, basically, is what it was one of the options that they have presented that the select board had chosen. They have been working on compiling that. Nothing has been submitted to the state of Maine at this point. I did have a conversation with Lisa today about other things and just wanted to make sure that I was clear on the status of that. So as of where things stand now, they will be requesting a meeting with state officials prior to submitting, just for any follow-up questions. Once the application gets submitted to the state of Maine, it's for the town of Shebig, it's GEI who will be submitting that. There will be a time frame where any person can provide comments relative to the application to DEP. At the same time, what GEI is going to do is going to have also an opportunity where they present that application and provide kind of an more informative session to the community about what that application is and the information. Now, this particular workshop, so to speak, or presentation isn't going to be to receive suggestions from the select board or from the public and change the application. It's more of explaining what entails within the application and what the process they went through. And then DEP will have, you know, a time frame where they will make a decision, and then ultimately we will hear back. As far as the time frame goes, with what Lisa told me today, they are looking most likely probably sometime in June to have that informative session. It will be here at the town office. They will let us know when the application is going to be submitted. The application, they are in very close contact with Rob Wood, so he's well aware that he's going to be receiving the application, as well as other individuals within the state. Once, so we will know when they submit the application on the behalf of the town, and then there will be a grace period for anybody to comment. Within that time frame, once it's submitted, that's when we will schedule a board meeting where GI will come and they will present that application similar to how we had had them come and explain the last time that they provided us a proposal. So any questions about that part before I move on to the planks or anything else? Carol?
Yeah, just a slight correction is that the next step is a pre-application meeting with the Maine DEP and some of the other agencies, including the Army Corps of Engineers, to discuss the project concept. And then based on that feedback, that might modify the design. So that's the next step, and that should happen, I would guess, in June sometime. And after that, either we go forward with the application, you know, with the proposal that they've already made, or they'll have to go back to the drawing board based on the agency comments and revise the design. So, you know, I think it's going to be a little while before we get to the permit submittal phase. So I think once they get the agency comments, they can talk to the public about
Yes.
what the plan is. So
Yeah.
I think that's true. But I just wanted to be sure. So the next meeting is really just a pre-application meeting. It's not, the application isn't submitted until after that meeting.
Correct, and
right.
GI will be reaching out to state agencies and asking for a meeting with them when the application is submitted, which that's when she's thinking July is going to be when it will be an opportunity to have a discussion on town level about the application, which will be similar to the time frame of when that application will be submitted to DEP official.
Okay. All right.
So planks, I think fairly quick discussion. So when the town first made the decision to put the planks in, the decision was more or less of a one-time and see how this goes and then revisit future discussions. I think there's some confusion, especially amongst contractors. The assumption from what I've heard and feedback was they thought the town was going to be putting the planks back in on May 15th. There was never a plan or discussion or a decision made to do that. The planks belong to Lionel. After they got removed, we asked them to remove them off the island because they were not ours, nor did we want to coordinate the hassle of trying to store something as big as that. So at this point, there is no plan to put the planks back in, nor has there been a discussion on a select board level to do so. Now, the board can choose to revisit that discussion. I'm happy to reach out to Lionel to see if that's something that you want to coordinate. My recommendation would be to, at this point, hold off on that until we have a better idea what the process is with the permitting. But that is ultimately a select board decision. There will be obviously cost associated around that because there was the first time. The first time it was small. I can't imagine that if this is something that we choose to do every 6 months, that the barge company is gonna be as willing to do it for such a small price. So, I think that's a discussion for the board to take up if you want to revisit and have the discussion about potentially opening up the placement of those in the meantime until you determine or until you have a better idea of what's happening relative to the permit submittal. Before having that discussion, maybe having a better understanding of what the process is relative to the culvert work and the washout could be helpful. So any questions before I keep talking?
Dave?
Assuming we're successful in our bid, what will the cost of the planks be, and do we have it in our budget?
So the cost of the planks was $5,000. There is no $5,000 in the budget for that because there wasn't a discussion of having that become a permanent thing. Initially, that came out of a reserve account.
So 2,500 in and then 2,500 out?
Correct.
Yeah.
Will that be the cost of new planks, or is that just the cost that's?
So those are the planks that Lionel Plant
Right.
used. They belong to them, and they charged us basically for delivery and labor of their planks. $2,500 for installation, $2,500 for removal.
So if we have to buy our own planks, will it be a similar cost?
Not even close. It will be significantly more expensive to buy something like that.
So how will we deal with that?
Well, that's,
That's why this agenda item is kind of a general, there hasn't been a discussion or a plan, so I can't answer how you would deal with that. I would recommend that you put it as an agenda item and discuss as a board how you want to proceed, and then I'm happy to research the information.
once there's a permittable plan, then we could see what it would cost, but until then, there's no real way to discuss what the cost would be, so. Any other questions?
I do. The planks were larger, I thought, and deeper than anticipated. Is there a concern that would they be the same planks?
No.
They would be different planks?
Well, are you talking about temporarily or
The
permanent?
temporary planks.
Oh, they'd be the same planks.
It would be the same planks.
If we were to go
Ideally,
temporary.
if Lionel even wants to keep,
Doing it.
Yeah, but there's, yeah,
if or what, or any of those, they're,
that's a temporary
That's
solution.
why
It
it's-
would likely cost more than 5,000 this time, and we're so close, relatively speaking, to being able to make a longer-term decision.
Right.
To me, the question becomes more of, given the current state down there, what are alternatives to keep things going? And one alternative is those planks, but I think there are other alternatives that Vika's going to talk about. And
so there is a town, within the town right away, a culvert that was clogged as a result of 2024 storms. There is a culvert on private property that was completely washed out. The town has been, for the last number of weeks, in conversations with DEP, with the code enforcement officer. I went down there with him. He's visited with several other people down there, contractors included, try to get a sense of what could be done to deal with that culvert, because that culvert being so full, as most of you probably have seen, and what it's doing is it's directly washing the water right into the exact area where the barge is coming in. That's causing a lot of washout, that's causing a lot of tire spinning, ultimately created an issue and created the process longer and more difficult for the barge company and the cars or vehicles coming and going. The culvert also needs to be tended to. At this point, if the town were to clean out the existing culvert or replace the existing culvert, the problem wouldn't be fixed because the water would just be running onto what is left of the town, of the private property, but also running in the same direction where it is. The problem would be relocated to a slightly different area. So there's been discussion of, can a culvert be placed underneath the road? Can a culvert be placed diagonally? In the meantime, what can be done to fix and and make the operation better and smoother in the meantime. And so the code enforcement officer has reached out to DEP. He has been in contact with Rob Wood and Pete Slavinsky and another gentleman. We have been told in the past, and we just wanted to make sure that we were understood and still had the permission and there weren't any confusion about doing repair down there. And so we are in the process as of today with the conversation with the code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer is going to get a permit through the state of Maine so the town can put in less than 10 cubic yards, so it's not going to be a significant amount of material similar to what is there to improve where the significant washout is. And so that's kind of the process that we're exploring right now, just to fix the mess that's down there. And it would be within Public Works' ability to do. It would be within routine repair work is what it would be considered. DEP's aware of it, the state is aware of it, the code enforcement officer is involved in it. So we've been trying to take every proper steps to make sure that we can do something to alleviate the problem that is there and figure that out. Then ultimately figure out what the culvert situation is, but then in the meantime, wait for what the outcome will be from submitting the application to the state of Maine. And so doing all these steps, trying to be mindful and aware that we're not trying to do something that we don't have permission to do, or we're appearing to be doing something more than just trying to maintain routine maintenance. So as of today, that's kind of where the discussion has taken us.
And a first step toward the potential of improving the culvert situation, I think, is you're in the process of getting stakes at the...
So, yeah, what we need to do right now is really to stake out what the town property, exactly where it is. And so there's been conversation of moving the culvert across the street, moving it diagonally. Right now, what we're trying to figure out is, one, where are the exact property lines, and then potentially taking the culvert and putting it diagonally to the property line, so then the washout is to the side of where the barge landing is, but not directly on it, and it wouldn't have any detrimental impact to the private property that's there, or anything like that. But potential fill and gravel that is appropriate by DEP would be the first step, and then figuring out what the options are for the culvert would be the second step. Those are all just routine maintenance. Culvert is maintenance as a result of the storm, all things that DEP is well aware of. We've been in constant contact with them to make sure that they know that we're trying to kind of upkeep the place while also waiting to see what the ultimate outcome will be with the permitting.
Well,
So is the permit application to DEP for a modification, is that a whole separate thing, or does this?
It
do they
is a
need to
whole
go hand
separate
in
thing,
hand?
but we also wanna, with anything that we might do now to improve or maintain, we don't wanna do anything that's going to negatively impact any
The next
decision-making, but any process
Okay.
altogether. So it's,
yeah, the permit for the fill is called permit by rule. It's the least impactful and least complicated permit, but it's been discussed with DEP, including Pete, that that's the appropriate step to take for the short-term repair. And it's a less invasive repair than the bringing the slabs back.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Carol?
Yeah, I guess having gotten roped into some of this conversation, but maybe not all of it, I'm just a little confused because we had left it in the hands, you had sent the engineering firm a drawing and they came back with a question about sort of right title and interest on a portion of that culvert. And then the next thing I know, the code enforcement officer is down there and contacting DEP directly. And it just seems like, you know, why didn't we go back to the engineering firm and say, no, that's not acceptable, we can't discharge onto private property, and what are the alternatives? Because we were down there with them days before that, and they did have some alternative suggestions, including, it sounds like, if I understand where the culvert may go, sounds like what you're talking about. I don't really think it's the code enforcement officer's role to redesign the drainage down there. I do think it's his role to make sure we do it in compliance with our state and local permits. But I guess when I talked with Lisa and myself, there seemed to be a little confusion about kind of, we hadn't gotten back to them with their question, meanwhile we'd gone off with the code enforcement officer. So I guess I just want to understand what the process is.
Understood. So yes, the initial discussion of asking GEI to help us with the relocating of the culvert across the street fell into the length of the culvert to make it effective would have fallen onto private property. That requires easements, town meeting, a process that is far too lengthy and convoluted for a fix that needs to be more immediate than several months of a process. And so I had asked the code enforcement officer to come take a look at the site with me last week because I wanted to make sure that any permitting related information that he would need to have and what our option was if we as Public Works could do maintenance down there. He had some suggestions for the culverts and the discussion did take place. What ultimately led to the last option that I just shared with you was a couple of different things. He had met with a couple other individuals down there and that was brought up. I did have a conversation about the hook with Lisa today, and while I had her on the phone, I had asked some questions relative to Jenks, and in those conversations, asked her if the placement kind of, the third option that I shared with you with the culvert being placed, and she agreed that that would be the more logical thing and it would make sense. And so as of today, she's aware that the other option is not an option and that GEI is in agreement and recommends that alternative ultimately. In the conversation with her I had today, the first step that we need to figure out is really what can we do for temporary routine maintenance, and then once we can get that settled, we can, or we can actually, you know, do it at the same time. We can get GEI to be more involved with the culvert assistance on the other part of it.
That's sort of my point, is I think we should stick with one entity that's kind of helping with this. And I think it might have been more efficient to go back to them and say, we need a different solution. And that, you know, they are, Lisa in particular is a permit expert. I think there was some confusion at the DEP as it filtered back to me. They thought Paul was calling about the barge ramp project, not the drainage. And so they called me to say, like, you know, how come your code enforcement officer is involved in the barge ramp? And so I had to explain. So I think just to try to keep the communication clear, particularly with the state agency, I kind of recommend we have one point of contact just so it doesn't get mixed up. And so I think it sounds like we've come up with the right solution temporarily. There was some discussion of more permanent solutions that could be incorporated into the barge ramp project if we decide we want to do that. But I think we need to clarify that to the you know, and talk about it at the pre-application meeting if that's something we want to do. So.
Yeah, I know that Paul, and I was CC'd on the email, I asked Paul to reach out to DEP to verify in writing that any maintenance does in fact still fall within the town being able to do, and so that's what
Okay.
he had emailed about, but I can see there's been other people that are getting involved. He's been asked by a number of people to go down there and visit, and so I think a lot of different people are trying to help and find a solution, with possibly a lot of different suggestions coming around, and it doesn't help that you've got the barge and the temporary repair and the culvert will all kind of need to be worked out in an order that isn't going to potentially negatively impact one thing or the next, or put the town in the position of trying to do the right thing, but ultimately doing something wrong totally unintentionally, so.
And do I understand correctly, we're going to use some material so, you know, beach nourishment is sort of the terminology to fill in the area, sort of native similar material, and then we're going to run the culvert sort of on the side of the road, access road that it's on now,
Yeah.
and keep it over there for the time being.
Yes, so, once the code enforcement officer submits the permit through DEP, I'm also making sure, and we did get it in writing, what kind of material we can use, so that way we're using exactly what DEP is in support of. There'll be more of a connection with GEI to help us make sure that the culvert replacement, which is part of, even though it's now been 2 years, part of storm damage repair, is done so within the town property and done appropriately. The first thing we need to do is hear back from surveyors and ask them to stake out exactly where that line is, so then we can ensure that we're within town right away and not doing something on private property that isn't appropriate to do so.
And the way the permit by rule works, we file it and then we can do the work within a short period of time, a couple
14
weeks.
days,
So
I
it's
think
not
it
a
is, yeah.
long permitting process.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions from the board on that? Any more from you, Vika, on that agenda?
I don't believe so, unless you have any questions. I think I probably confused you all more than provided the information.
There's a lot going on there. Any questions from the public, comments from the public? Pam?
I have a question about conflict of interest.
Can you back up to the green X, please? Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question about conflict of interest for the code enforcement officer. So when he's asked to design something and then he's required to approve it or to bring it to the town's attention, how can he do all of that?
So I don't think he was asked to design anything. This is a routine culvert replacement. There's no design involved in a routine code placement. I think there's an extra level of care being given in the form of him calling the DEP and in the form of getting the surveyor to stake out the lines, because it's a very sensitive area, because of the nature of the sand dunes down there. But he didn't design anything. And if you think there's a conflict of interest, I guess you could talk to the town administrator. I don't.
Well, I'd like to bring it to the board's attention now for your discussion. I think there is a conflict of interest and certainly the appearance of one.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
If I might just ask one question, and
Could you introduce yourself, please?
my name is John Harvey, 18 Bennett's Cove Road. I think first, I just wanted to second what Jackie said at the beginning of the meeting about tonight as just one isolated example where I counted 12 trucks, and I'm coming from a different vantage point across the road and counted 12 that were idling for over an hour as 2 barges were there, one on the beach and then one was spinning right off of the beach around the Neville.
Okay.
And it makes it very difficult to use the road, and the driveways were blocked all the way up to Vales. So I've never seen that before, where they're going all the way up the hill towards Vales. And there was no way that I could have left our driveway, and there was no sense that Jackie could have until about 5:45. Because I wanted to, I think, hope that in good faith, that can be addressed.
Okay.
And second, I have heard a lot about the different ways that we're addressing the barging, and I'm confused about what the next steps are. And I'm wondering if, after this discussion that we've just had, if somebody could please just sort of enumerate what those steps are toward the DEP submission of the of whatever you want to submit to the DEP.
Okay, so briefly, I'll start at short-term repairs and try to go all the way through the potential of a longer-term solution. So from a short-term repair standpoint, the first steps include the surveyor staking out where the lines are. It includes the town submitting a permit by rule application for repairs that are of a routine or storm damage nature. And that would include both material replacement, where material has been washed out by the erosion that is being driven by the failure of the culverts, which was storm-related and then cumulative even after the storms. And it would also include potential culvert replacement in a way that is consistent with DEP regulations and the advice of the Maine Geologic Survey. That's all short-term in nature. Beyond that, the project with GEI is ongoing. That project is looking at whether there is a permittable solution to a more stable but yet environmentally friendly approach to a functioning barge ramp at that location. So that's the longer term issue. That's the one that Carol and Vika were talking about, a pre-application here or meeting, and then a public discussion at some point, reviewing what the application looks like, and then moving forward or not with that longer term solution.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Anything else from the public? Jackie?
Well, Jackie is walking up. I just want to also mention one thing that the board has discussed that will, I believe, likely take place at some point, and that is to, regardless of whether Bennett's Cove is going to be permittable or not, the board has talked about starting the conversation with stakeholders and then some about having some level of control, and maybe control is not the right word, of
Management.
Traffic
management
yeah.
of barging and vehicles and things like that. And so that's definitely something that has been brought up, and I don't want to speak for the board, but I think the board has an interest in getting those conversations started and trying to find some form of solution.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, even if it is permittable or not permittable, that's the location for the near future regardless, and so other decisions and discussions should be taking place in the future.
Including but not limited to issues such as where to park, where to stage, when to turn off engines, all those things. So I want to,
Sorry.
that was just a filler while Jackie was coming up. Jackie, please.
What you just said, Vika, reminded me that I think it was at the end of last summer when the parking ordinance was being modified, you had included a document about the concept of, I'll call it off-site parking, staging,
Staging area,
et cetera. So, here we are, almost a year later. So I mean, of course, I feel it's urgent for the board to have a discussion, maybe at the next meeting, about, a staging idea. And I was also thinking, as you were speaking, that soon, 3 empty well, if you count Vales, it would be 4 empty residences on the road will be occupied. 3 to 4 additional residences, Rodney and I being the only 2 in the winter.
Good.
I have a couple of questions, and when you refer to the washout area, I think that was the term you used. Exactly what are you referring to?
so where the culvert has failed and is completely full, there's a puddle that's been created on the surface. That water is running off, and it's running off directly into where the barge comes in, creating a washout there. You've noticed that there is a bit of a divot to it's not as flat as it was, it's now washed out. And there's a lot of tire marks and there's a lot of spinning that's taken, but you probably are far more aware of it than I am. That's the area where we're confirming with DEP that we could do routine maintenance and be able to put in some gravel and materials similar to what's there approved by DEP to prevent from
My perception of the washout area, the deep ruts, as you're facing the beach, the deep ruts are on the left. And of course, the culvert is on the right. Well, the culvert and the little pool are on the right.
Mhm.
It's also my perception that, I'm not sure where the culvert started, whether it was near where the little pool is, and I believe that little pool was somewhat, well, created by heavy trucks backing in there, making a depression. Is it your impression that the culvert started where that little pool is?
The culvert is entirely clogged from the 2024 storm surge.
Yes, where the pool is where the culvert starts.
Yeah.
And it used to go overboard.
It used to go along that northwesterly edge of the road, and it then flowed through a little ditch through the culvert that was on private property in front of the last cottage down there, whose name escapes me.
Hence,
But yes, it used to go overboard,
Yeah.
hence, thank you, hence.
Their culvert was completely washed out.
so there were 2 culverts?
Two
Yeah.
culverts, with a small ditch in between them. And the puddle that we're describing uphill of the upper culvert is 2 or 3 feet deep. It was a
Oh, I
designed
am
catchment
familiar.
for the culvert.
I haven't, tested to see how deep it is, but I know it's not shallow.
Right, but so I'm addressing your point, or your idea that it was created by trucks backing up there. Any truck that backed into that hole 2
Well-
years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, would not have gotten out of that hole.
The hole, my perception is that the hole has only been created in the last couple of years.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I would, having moved a lot of construction trucks through there back when I was doing that kind of work, I would disagree with you, but we can only look at the physical evidence to determine that. Thanks, Jackie. Carol, you have something?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Any other public comments? Mark?
Yeah, Mark's the expert.
First of all, no, I'm not an expert on anything. I'll try to be gentle with my concerns and suggestions. I don't understand, first of all, why the surveyors didn't stake that out when they were asked to survey it. I can specifically remember asking that every time we had took taxpayers' money to have an area surveyed, that when they left, it was staked out. That should have been staked out, then you wouldn't have the question of where private property meets town property. First of all, that needs to be fixed immediately by this town. Second of all, I understand the sensitivity down there. I grew up down there. I never dreamed it would morph into what it is today. But we have no other primary place to haul our trash and our recyclables off the island. I'm not gonna be building houses anymore. I may build a garage, my wife doesn't want me to even do that. My point being, I'm not up here speaking on behalf of my tiny little inept construction business to try to get trucks onto Venice Cove Beach. Third of all, I think the town should find the $5,000 in the budget somewhere, which I believe is probably available at some point, and have the plant replace those unpopular in places of this community planks back on that beach. Placing geotextile and gravel in that clay with that water running down through there is not going to solve that problem. It's going to make a deeper mess for trucks to get back into. It won't solve it. Third of all, Herb Main and I are still acting as drainage road committee people. I don't know if the town wants us to continue to do that. I think we're willing to do that. We've got a lot of experience in it. We surveyed every culvert on this island. And growing up in the Dyer family, I know how a culvert is supposed to be put in and how it works. No one asked the code enforcement officer to go down there and design anything. I asked him to go down there with Herb and I today because if you're replacing drainage next to the shoreland zone, that's a sensitive drainage issue. I believe there's room down there to drain that right beside that existing loading area from that pool. I know that the culvert is completely plugged. I understand the other one that used to be under Hanson's driveway is completely ripped up. That's just the way it is. Those culverts were put in by my father and Miss Bone in 1980, probably. I don't know when they were put in. I don't think it lasted that long.
Right.
It's a miracle. Backing those trucks rotted out. Galvanized culvert. I'm asking the town to be a little bit more than proactive, and I do appreciate Carol's contact with the DEP. I think Rob Wood's a really good individual to talk with from DEP. I understand the correct channels are important. I certainly didn't mean to add to any confusion with proper process. We're just trying to help. And without insulting the other people that use the facility a whole lot, me that are trying to make a living, trying to get garbage and dumpsters on here for the transfer station to get the recyclable and the cardboard off the island is pretty darn important to the operation of this town and the budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Other comments from the public? Bo?
Thank you, Bo. So we heard a lot about the culvert, and the planks and all that. What about the road? Is GEI looking at the road? It's always been an issue. The road's narrow. Just even the beachgoers going down there, it was always an issue about safety, walkers, bikers. And obviously, the barge ramp doesn't help that situation down there being narrow. I don't agree with the idling for hours on end. Shut the truck off. I can't remember where we left off when we did the talks about a satellite area or stuff like that. But if the road was looked at, or even tarred, that would alleviate the dust. Make it more road for you guys to drive on. So, thank you.
Thanks, Bud. Mika or Carol, you know the answer to the question of to what degree and for what length is the scope of the work that GEI is doing down there inclusive of the road? I think it's
The road
minimal.
is not included
It's
in
not
the project.
inclusive. The question they have been tasked to answer for the town is, what are the alternatives for a barge landing,
Right.
period? Not to say that we might not need to deal with the road after that.
Correct.
I also believe, based on, I agree, we need to manage the traffic. And I think it's unfair to the residents to be 100% focused on the infrastructure solution without also looking at the traffic issue. So I think we need to make that a priority. And you're right, I think we talked about it in the fall of '24 when GEI submitted their report to us. That's when, it was October or something. So anyway, I think we need to find a path forward on that, and I'm not sure a stakeholder meeting is the first step, and maybe it's really understanding what options people use for managing traffic at barge landings and other places like that first, and then we could have a stakeholder meeting. So I think we can find some resources and get back to the residents about, having a stakeholder meeting about managing that. I think that's a challenge. It's going to be tough because we don't have a lot of capacity right now to manage that kind of traffic. So maybe we're going to have to restrict it. I don't know. We need to come up with a solution. You might recall that we sort of voluntarily, and I think it was the town administrator, spoke with the barge operator to ask the trucks operators to not come down to the site until they're pretty much ready to load. And we experienced ourselves when we were down there the other day that they were quite a ways away and the trucks were already there. So I think that's something we can at least, try to encourage them again, not to be sitting down there, but that's a voluntary kind of thing. But I think we're gonna have to come up with a management plan. And then we gotta figure out how to implement it. And since it's, it's challenging to manage the the minimal parking we have on the island right now, never mind a barge landing. So it's not a simple solution, I don't think. But I do think we should make that a priority, and I also would ask town administrator to at least ask plant associates what it would cost if we decided we wanted to put the concrete planks back. I will say that the DEP was not over the moon about those particular planks because they're not standard barge boat planks. They are pieces of the $1 million bridge that Coley had left over, and they were much more substantial, as Eliza James said, than what they expected to see. So they aren't the kind of planks that are meant to be removable, and so, maybe that's, if we think we're gonna have to go that way, then maybe we should be looking at expending money in that, and I think Meredith, you did a bunch of research last year on what the different options were for materials to use. So anyway, I think it's not so much a money issue. I think it's, for me anyway, I think it's trying to see if we can come up with an answer that's a permanent solution and then making some interim decisions. And I think that's what Vika was saying. It's like, once we get an answer about what we can or can't do, we can make a better decision. But it would be good to know what the cost to reinstall those would be so that we can, that might inform the board's decision.
I do know that when we were in those discussions about planks, we did speak with a couple other companies. One that I spoke to was the constructors, I don't remember the exact name of the business, but they proposed a
CMP
solution.
constructors.
It was over $100,000 for the kind of devices that they use when they're in a wet area, putting in a temporary solution. That's not to say that's the only solution out there, but that was one of the alternatives that we came across last time, so. Other comments, questions? Mary, please.
Dressed for the camera.
Good work.
The only thing that I wanted to mention about the planks being put in now is one of the pieces of our conversation last year when they went in was when, I can't remember his name, from Lenny came and was talking about the issue of if we lose power in winter, that we won't get a truck over here and it could, domino effect of tragedies on the island. So if we use them now for our 6 months, where does that leave us for the winter if one of those emergencies happen? That's
Good point of strategy. Thank you, Meredith. Other comments, questions? Bo?
So I've heard in the previous meetings about stakeholders, and I don't know if that's the correct word, because stakeholders are people that have interest in that. And then I've heard that there was meetings with the abutters, the people that are in that location. I'm a stakeholder.
Correct.
I use Bennett's. I have Final Plan bring me material. I also use CDC, although CDC can't handle the volume that I do. So if there is talks with the stakeholders, I'd like to be included.
Absolutely.
That is presumed.
Yes. Thanks, Bo.
Thanks.
Jack?
I'll be brief. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, communicating with Lyle Plant about coordination could potentially be very useful. The new owner of Alex Todd, I think it's Alex Todd's home, had their mover come from Maryland today. And there were 2 large moving trucks on the Cottage Road. I could barely squeeze by on the Cottage Road. Then they were down there idling for an hour. I chatted with one driver or whatever, there were 4, I think, mover type people. And he told me they were very cold in their shorts on the beach. And anxious to get into their heated vehicle and also anxious for the barge to come. And he, where's the barge? And he told me that he had been told to be there at 3:30. And they were driving onto the barge when I left my house at 4:45. So that's not exactly coordination.
Thanks, Jack.
So I think it'd be useful to talk with Coley.
All right, I'm going to ask that we wrap this up. We've gone quite a bit longer. It's all valuable. Yes, David?
A very short point of order. Regarding stakeholders, anybody who generates trash on Shebig Island, anybody who has a house built, anybody who's doing any kind of living on Shebig Island is a stakeholder.
Correct. Yep. Thanks, David.
Just one final point, if I might, I think, I just want to make clear that, when we're talking about stakeholders, I think the whole premise is that people are stakeholders in the initiative to have materials come on and off the island, and to me, having opportunities for people who are directly affected by the process every day is different from the need to have certain materials coming off and on the island. And that I don't want to get in the business of pointing any fingers at who is idling and who isn't and stuff like that. It is a problem, and whoever isn't doing it, there are people who are for hours.
Okay.
And that is an issue where I can't hear myself think or talk on the phone sometimes because the idling is so loud. And just to make the point that there is a differentiation, because everybody on the island is a stakeholder in this whole process, and that's why I think we're having these conversations to begin with. And I'm hopeful that at some point, I understand that we are going to have opportunities to hear from GEI and hear from you and et cetera. But I'm hopeful that we'll have more opportunities for our own input as we move forward as well in the process.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on.
May I just say one thing? I think it is time to look at a management plan
Right.
and really have that a priority. I just want to second that. Thank you.
Yep. All right, moving on, item 25-029, to review and authorize the town administrator to sign the MOU between the town of Yarmouth and the town of Shebig regarding the Cousins Island dock and what steps would be appropriate. So for those who don't know, the MOU says that given that Shebig is on the hook for 80% of the cost of maintenance and in particular, long-term capital improvements of that wharf, that Shebig has expressed an interest in taking the lead on engineering of long-term solutions. And in a recent meeting with Yarmouth, they were certainly understanding of that and supportive of that. And also they offered that their town engineering department, while busy with a lot of other things, was willing to help us with that. So the MOU was approved, and I believe it is now ready to be signed by the town administrator and the town manager of Yarmouth. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as the MOU is presented to you, there is some redlining in it.
Yeah.
So our town attorney, Shebig's town attorney, did the initial drafting of it. So it was drafted by the Shebig's town attorney. The red lining and the couple of comments, those were the only comments that Yarmouth had. And so I presented it to you with that to show what they commented. One example, you know, was increasing it from 1,000 to 5,000. And so they don't need, because Scott is a town manager, he doesn't need council approval to sign this. Because I'm the town administrator, I do, which is why it's presented to you in the manner that it is, so you could see the small differences and the input that they provided.
Right, so David.
I move that we authorize the town administrator to sign the MOU between the town of Yarmouth and the town of Shebig regarding the Cousins Island dock.
All right, is there a second? Second by Richard. Any discussion on the board? Eliza?
Yes, on 1A, it says, so Shebig Island will be solely responsible for preparing and issuing? That's the difference? Or is it,
Where are you?
so on 1A, selection of a bidder?
Issuing a request. So what this is doing is it's putting it on Shebig's
Okay,
hands to do it versus before they prepared everything and handed it to the town.
gotcha, thank you.
This would be more of the town taking the lead on it.
Good.
Which is more responsibility for us, but
Yes.
Yeah.
But who's the primary user of the facility, Shebig, it makes sense.
Okay.
David?
Yeah, if I could amend my own resolution here, I'd like to add to it that we would raise the $5,000, excuse me, $1,000 minimum to $5,000 in case of need of more repairs.
But you made a motion to authorize it as is, so that includes with these changes.
That change is already in.
Anticipated changes in here.
Does that include that change?
It does.
Okay, then I stand corrected. Thank you.
Yeah, because so what I would do is I would accept these red marks, and that will be the final document for signatures.
Good. Other comments from the board? Any comments from the public before we vote? Seeing none. Motion on the floor, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Item 25-030, to review the coastal slope stabilization analysis on South Shore Drive by GEI dated May 8th, and determine when to continue discussion on the board and next steps. So I think the intent here was to, having just received this document recently, to get the document out there so that the board and the public had time to look at it. We could have discussion tonight, but it's not anticipated that we would be voting on anything tonight, but rather to vote on that perhaps at the next meeting, if that's what the board thinks is appropriate. So, Open for discussion, anybody?
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
if you don't mind? So I did forward this to, Bruce Anderson has been the point of contact for, the residents, within South Shore Drive, so I did forward this to him so he could share it with, the residents in the area in case if some people don't pay attention to town news, so they are aware of this. And, the other part, which I think might make sense to discuss it, is to, money obviously is a big discussion here, and, there's about $740,000 of the federal share that, should be coming to the town. And so when that money is in hand, could make it for a lot easier for the board to have a discussion in terms of how you want to proceed and what you want to do moving forward when it comes to this.
Karen?
Yeah, so I agree. I think you had said you were hoping that we'd hear from FEMA by the end of the month. So I suggest that I do think the next step, as GEI says in their report, is they said they were willing to come to a select board meeting. So what I would do is suggest that we have a workshop maybe before a select board meeting or as part of the select board meeting where they come and present their findings and we can ask questions and the public can ask questions. So I think we wouldn't want to do that before June because, because we're not going to know necessarily where, I think there's sort of no point in having much discussion until we know where the money stands. And if we don't hear by the end of May and we're still waiting, then I think we need to wait because it's.
Totally different picture.
And we can't really make any decisions, so what's the point? I think if it goes months, then we may have to step back and figure out how we're gonna do something. But
I'm hopeful that, we will have $1.4 million
me too.
in checks by the end of the month.
Right, so assuming that's the case, then and that some portion of that is for South Shore Drive, then we can meet and say, this is how much we have and what's it gonna take.
Yeah, and it'll, with the federal share, because it was $935,000 ultimately that was awarded. There is a town share that we're responsible to cover that, which is 10%. MEMA covers 10%, or federal covers 75% of it, and so it's around $735,000 change that would be the physical check that we would be receiving. That would go directly toward, in my conversation with Lisa today, I did ask her to, I took advantage to kind of ask any questions that I had while I had her on the phone for something irrelevant to this, but that this report was in fact reflected and the recommendations were having seen what the FEMA mitigation recommendation is.
Yes.
Because the mitigation and their anticipated mitigation efforts was in the $300,000. And so it is really important that with whatever decision the town chooses to do, that it stays within that scope that is provided for FEMA, because otherwise we will have to give that money back. Eventually, we will have to report how we spend the money, what we spent it on, what the work was done. And so if the town chooses to do whatever they want without keeping that information in mind, 2 years down the road, you could be faced in a position of the federal government saying, nope, you didn't do it the way we thought you were going to. And so Lisa wasn't aware and said that that's definitely something that with however the town proceeds with this, they have that information in mind and they will assist the town in making sure that we do it in the best way to maximize all of those funds to the best of our ability, so we don't have to give anything back, because that would be kind of terrible to have to do.
Separate but related, there was conversation with the second FEMA team, if you will, the more appropriate and informative FEMA team, that if they say, this is how much money we're going to give you based on this is how much we think it's going to cost, but then your actual engineering that you perform comes back and says, no, it didn't cost what FEMA said, it cost more. There is a mechanism by which you can apply for more. I'm not proposing that we do that because of the current political situation. And certainly if it delayed use of the first amount of money, we would want to think twice before asking for more, but just keep in mind that there was a mechanism for truing up FEMA's estimate to what the actual engineering comes in at. So when these conversations happen, hopefully we can.
I do plan to send this report. I was waiting until there was a board discussion about it. I do plan to send it to the FEMA representative tomorrow, just to let her know that this is what we were presented with. A future discussion will take place.
Yep.
Let me know if there are any red flags on your part, because she's also being, now that she's more or less done with us, she's gonna be moved to a different location. And so I wanna take advantage of her service, because FEMA's job is done. We've closed out everything, so it's now through the state of Maine. But while I still have access and as helpful as she's been, I wanna make sure that this report is in line with what their expectation is for the work to be complete in the future.
Eliza, any correct?
So, excuse me, just to be clear, the amount for South Shore Drive is 700 and how much?
It's, I believe, and I looked at it today, it's 734, 745, 735.
Okay,
Almost half of that is mitigation. So about half of that is to bring it back to pre-storm condition, and the other half is to improve it to try to prevent from it happening again type of a thing. So
right.
there has to be kind of
Okay.
a fine line of how the work is done, what is done to make sure
And
that we.
that is with the understanding that the town will contribute 10%.
No, that's why we're gonna be, in the cost of the project, they estimated was in the $900,000 range, expecting the town to contribute 10%. If we take our project and we work within that $735,000 that we're getting from the federal government, there's no obligation to write a check for the town's 10% share. We just,
Okay,
so we could have gone and said, we have $935,000 to spend, and spend $935,000. The government would have only given us $735 of their share, we would have been. But if we know what we're getting from them, we can be more, in any way, I think the town will figure out how to meet the difference if there is, or revisit
okay.
doing it.
And MEMA will also potentially contribute 10%?
But that's all inclusive.
That's
FEMA, MEMA is
inclusive,
all.
thank you. So last question, as it exists now, is it safe for the summer?
I'm sorry?
Is there anything that needs to be done safety-wise for people to access their property for the summer beyond what's there now?
So to date, the fire department and the town public works staff feels comfortable driving down that road. My biggest priority as a road commissioner is to make sure that we can get our safety equipment down the road. Until fire department comes to me and says, we don't feel safe going down that road, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing and hope to make some progress and getting something done in the future.
And also we have a rare May nor'easter coming tomorrow, so. Sure.
So in terms of moving things forward, I guess as I'm sitting here thinking, I think a separate workshop on this topic might be better than trying to tag it onto a select board meeting, because it's exhausting. So I'm wondering if you might, we want to do it after town meeting perhaps, but before July 4th, and maybe we could explore, you could talk to GEI and see what their availability would be towards the end of May, like maybe even end of June, maybe that last week in June, or the next to last week, and see if we could tentatively schedule something, and then if the money doesn't come through, we can reschedule it. But I think if we wait till the end of May, we might have trouble getting everybody's.
Yeah.
What does the board want to do? Would you rather have it as part of a board meeting, or do you want to do it separately?
It's more efficient if it's not in a formal meeting.
But I mean, on the same day as a meeting, or totally separate meeting?
Of the town. No.
Do you want to have that conversation as part of a select board meeting, or have that conversation in the form of a workshop in a separate meeting.
Like a different night of the week.
Different night of the week, or a weekend day, or whatever.
I think
That's the question.
appropriate. Yeah, workshop.
I think that's the question that the board will need to deal with. I think we can deal with it after we find out about the FEMA money, but be thinking about what's the best format for that meeting. Okay,
I would recommend doing it separate. I mean, you've done it for you've done it for Bennett's Cove workshop, you've done it for the Stonework workshop. I think for the benefit of, you know, possibly even making the residents feel like this is being prioritized or really giving a full discussion, I think it would be beneficial to just have GI come and do just that one presentation and you focus on that. But that's for you as a board to ultimately decide on.
and if that's an hour and a half, and you try to do that in front of a regular meeting, that turns into a very long day, so, yeah.
And it's in there, that service of having GEI come for the workshop is included in the contract?
Yes, they included that within the scope of work, yes.
That's great, thank you.
All right, so that was more of an informational item. Any questions from anybody? Oh. All right, moving on. Other business. Nikki, you said you had one?
Yeah, so I just have one thing. If you recall, it's happened it's been a couple of times over the last couple of months, but anytime CMP requests for a pole installation, they have to submit a form to the code enforcement officer. Code enforcement officer can't authorize that until the select board authorizes it. There is a pole that needs to be installed down on Schoolhouse Road. The code enforcement officer has visited, he's looked, he's got no issues with the location. Because it's a pole being placed on town right away, it needs select board authorization, and so it's one pole, and I'm just looking for a motion from the select board to authorize the town administrator to sign the CMP proposal for a pole application on Schoolhouse Road.
It's actually located where there's some new excavation work going on, I assume, right across from Chuck Carney's driveway. Is that the pole location?
I'm pretty sure it's right there, yeah.
Do we have such a motion? Does anybody like to, David? Okay. Motion to approve the
As you
pole
said.
application. Is there a second?
I can't say what it is, but I'm
Seconded by Carol. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, approved unanimously. Other business? Other? Carol?
I think it would be best under other business. I just wanted to bring people up to speed on the wildfire mitigation project that will be the same weekend as town meeting. And I believe where things stand, Ellie has been working on it. So the group, Team Rubicon, will arrive on the island on Friday, work potentially in the afternoon on Friday, then work all day Saturday and maybe half a day on Sunday. Bill Mackenzie has found them housing with a friend, which is great, and then we have a community dinner here on Saturday night. And there has been a bit of a kerfuffle about access to properties. I think we've straightened that out as far as I know. And, but it is kind of a large community effort. The one thing that Lee Bowman asked, the property owner at Deer Point, is that, you know, he's got a big property, it's got a lot of, you know, woods, and we are gonna go in there, or they're gonna go in there and cut stuff. And he just wants to be sure that it will be removed, whatever we cut. And so what I told him, and we expect that we'll remove it all that weekend. But if something comes
The
up.
brush, not the logs, right?
Yeah, we're not really cutting any logs that I'm aware of. So the brush will be removed, but he just wanted a commitment from the town that if something came up, can we commit that we'll definitely get it out of there by sometime certain. So I suggested that we would get it out of there by the end of June, no matter what, even if it's Herb and I and Bob out there cleaning up the brush. He's good with that. I don't think he needs a letter. He just wanted us to discuss it and make a commitment to that effect. And so I think what I can do, if the board is in agreement with that, then we can follow up with an email, I think, and just, probably best from Vika, and actually, or the fire department, and just say, here's the deal, we appreciate you, you know, cooperating with us to work on the property, and, you know, we expect to be able to remove everything that weekend, but, you know, at any rate, no later than the end of the month.
So does anybody have any heartache with that communication?
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thanks, everybody.
I,
Go ahead.
So, relative to that, Ellie, told me yesterday that the same program is looking to barge out a chipper and a vehicle out here at the end of June, to potentially finish any of that work, but also make it available to anybody on the island if they have brush that they want chipped. And it would be a free service to the community. And so she wanted to know if there would be support from the town to do that. I had asked her to reach out to Climate Action, who had played a role in that. Carol, who had played a role in it. I didn't have any issues with it. We did reach out to CTC because there would be a cost associated with barging a vehicle and a chipper that would ultimately do that for free for people. CTC not only said that they would be willing to, because we did ask for discounts, not only that they would be willing to charge for that large cost at 50%, but for all of the transport of the individuals that are going to be coming to the island for that weekend, the CTC costs will be at 50% to help the community and show their effort at contributing. And then in addition to that, we had asked if for that weekend our flex passes, which are only supposed to be a day pass, could be used for the weekend. So then we can make it a little easier for some of these people to come to the island with all the equipment. And permission was granted for that. So CTC
That's nice.
was nice enough to contribute in some way for the work that is going to be done relative to that.
Yep, awesome. Thank you, CTC.
Can I ask about the chipper? Will someone, chipping is an option for residents at no charge. Is someone running the chipper from that organization?
Yes, and
The
so,
organization just is the Maine Forest Service.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so the chipper would be present with someone from the
He's
Maine
gonna
Forest
bring a truck and a chipper, and that's what Ellie was kind of just trying to look to make sure that there is interest in it, that there's support from the town in it, and that, you know, we can get CTC to be involved in it. What they would do is they would come to the island for the day, for the night, however it would work around there would be a sign-up sheet, she would coordinate kind of that, and then the chips could either stay on people's property or be brought to the transfer station.
So I think that the Maine Forest Service ideally would have tried to get their chipper here the same weekend, but it's not possible. I think this was his offer to sort of follow up, and he felt kind of obligated to try and get a chipper out here. I think probably he'll give a brief talk about, you know, safety and wildfire mitigation at the dinner, and maybe he's gonna encourage people to, you know, cut some brush, and then they potentially could run around the island with their chipper. I think that's the concept.
Yeah.
I have to say, you know, we could live without the chipper because the operation we're doing is a couple weeks ahead of time, and we will be bringing stuff to the, you know, transfer station, a brush dump, and that's kind of the plan. So, and maybe we'll have a chipper or not, but, so I think it's really a separate thing, and, you know, so I don't think it's essential that we do it. I think he's tried to make a generous offer to the town. So, you know, I just wanted to give my perspective on it. And if Ellie has capacity to help coordinate it, great, I don't. And so if she wants to make it, you know, known to property owners that they could have brush chipped on their property, I think that's what he's talking about. And then, you know, use it right there. I think that's what he's talking about.
But that could be a big job. I just spent the day at my house listening to chipping all day long with a neighbor. So there's a lot of volume out there.
Well, I don't think they'd be doing a ton of volume at each property. I don't know. I think,
Okay.
to be honest, I think we need to connect with Kent and get a clear understanding, you know.
I think chipping at the crush dump might make sense, or chipping things that are still at.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to bring it over just to chip stuff at the brush dump, honestly, because that's a whole nother problem.
I like the idea to try to avoid the brush dump, and if
Yeah.
they're able to spend a day and drive around and chip quantities of people's brush, and then people have the chips right there in the yards, that's kind of the direction that I think would be good. What I'd like to avoid is to have a big mountain of chips at the transfer station out of a community type of event. So,
And I think the way I understand it from Ellie is people will sign up and first come, first serve. So if
Yeah.
you snooze, you lose,
Yeah.
and they'll only be able to do how many houses a day, I don't know, you know.
Okay,
Wow.
So I guess we have no objection as a select board, and I think we'll leave it to Ellie to kind of continue down that path.
I've got it on my calendar to talk to her about it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a logistical
It is.
thing to deal with, though.
Yep, okay. Speaking of Ellie, I sent an email to everybody once again at the last minute.
Sorry, I haven't seen it.
10:57 this morning, after speaking with Julia Brule at 10:53 this morning, and I asked her to put our conversation into an email. So, as most of you know, GP-COG has lost their funding and has been scrambling to find funding to keep Ellie and people like Ellie in the programs that they're part of through December, which is the normal end of the program. And she said, we haven't heard from Shabig. Are you okay with contributing some money? A few communities aren't able to. Most communities have been able to say they would do that. And she talked about how the money gets used and what happens if they find other funding, what happens if the feds turn the spigot back on, all that kind of thing. I asked her to put that all into the form of an email, and I said, we really don't want to contribute money for the benefit of other communities. That's not in our work. We can't do that. And she said, that's very clear. The money you contribute would only be used for Ellie. And in the email, you will see the cost per fellow for the remainder of the program, which is 8 months, May through December. That dollar figure is listed, and the dollar figure that they would be asking us to contribute. And I said, it's $10,000 is what they're asking us. I'm not going to read the other figure because that relates to more than just Ellie's pay, but it relates to Ellie's pay. And I suggested that it might be appropriate for us to talk about it tonight, or at the latest at our next meeting, in case the board wanted to contribute that $10,000. And then, if so, did the board want to take it from contingency from this year, for example? Or did we have grant money that we wanted to spend on this, and when did that need to be spent? So apologies for bringing it up at the last minute. It's soon enough for for us to talk about it at the next meeting, or we could talk about it tonight. Carol?
I would recommend we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and there are grant funds potentially. I don't know how, the pros and cons of doing it with grant funds versus contingency or splitting it or something. So I think we should come back. I think Aldrich and Bob are managing the fellow and Vika's managing the finances. So I think maybe they can come back with a specific proposal. And
it's the first time I'm hearing about it, so.
yeah, so I think we need to be a little more organized before we vote on it. But one thing that I'm just reading this now, but what happens, because what I understood is they wanted to kind of support the cohort as a group. So what happens with the fellows where their towns don't have money?
They're gonna find money. They're committed to finding that money.
So basically, if we come up with 10 grand for our fellow, like the likelihood is Ellie can continue for the full fellowship.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and I think it's fair, that's still a reasonable, we've paid 5,000 so far, right? So, yeah, and she's a crackerjack.
We're getting our money's
I'd
worth.
like to find a way to.
Well, okay, and I said thank you for saying that, Julia, just a question out of the blue from one board member, is there any way that this program can be renewed. She said, well, no, wait, it's not AmeriCorps anymore. We can do whatever we want. She kind of lit up. She said, it's a really interesting idea. We should explore that. So it's something to talk about. We've talked about the need for a planner / fundraiser kind of person. She clearly is not a trained planner, but there is training available, and she's certainly shown her chops at project management, which is a big part of fundraising. So anyway, put that on the agenda for 6/2. All right. Any other business? Sure.
Meeting on the.
From the last joint, whatever it was, finance budget meeting,
Oh.
the school committee, Jeff Putnam on the school committee had asked us to provide him with sort of a breakdown, similar to what they did, sort of breaking out the operational cost, at least this is how I understood it, operational costs from the debt service from the capital. And I haven't seen that. Did you ever get that back to him?
I did not. I got a reminder today from Bob, and I have not connected with him. I did get the numbers, and I will connect with him, but I will be honest, I had not done it.
Okay, well, I think that, I had made the request of the school committee that they break out their costs, because a lot of their cost reductions are related to debt service and reduced tuition, and I feel obligated, to provide them with the same information, and it's been a week. So I think also Bob had asked that you copy the whole board once you get that
Well,
together.
Bob thought he did.
I thought that email,
You did?
yeah.
That's the email that I said I sent to you that I can't find that I sent it. So I think I did it when I was on the road.
Whatever.
Got lost in Ohio.
Bob did, I asked for a copy, then Bob jumped on and said, could you send it to the whole board?
Yep.
But anyway, I'll forward it to you, but bottom line is I think it would benefit the board to see it, so.
Yep.
And certainly before, I think. as soon
It's a
as-
6.5% for the municipal expenditure
Okay.
budget if you remove capital. So it ends up being
Capital
a
and
6.
debt service. That's what,
That's,
yeah. So if you could just do,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
So-
follow kind of the format that Aaron used, I think that would be fine. So you could break out each department like he did and just calculate the changes and then the total difference for operational, and then he did debt service and capital separately. And I think part of what that shows is that a big part of our budget increase is related to about another 200,000 in capital as compared to last year.
right,
So it's also helpful for the public to understand that.
yeah.
Okay. Other business? Thinking, no, okay. Moving on to communications. You got anything to report?
I don't believe so, nothing that I haven't yet mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody, communications? Going once, going twice, okay. To approve the minutes from May 7, 2025, is there such a motion?
Go, David, go.
I move
So moved.
the May 7th, 2025 minutes.
Sweet. Second? By Eliza. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, items to be placed on a future agenda. Traffic management, as at Bennett's specifically, and working with both parking enforcement, idling enforcement, but also staging and those kind of things.
What's the date of the next meeting?
June 2nd, I believe.
That's a Monday?
Sorry, it's not June 2nd.
June 4th.
June 4th.
Okay. So before town meeting, though?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
The traffic and parking ordinance, we had talked about having it at this meeting, and I completely spaced
Yep.
putting it, so that would be a good one to
Yeah, because people are
talk
gonna be
about.
asking.
Yes, they already are.
Yeah. I have to say, it's been refreshing.
I did talk to, while we're on that subject real quick, I did talk to the sheriff. He has a copy, he has a book of our town parking tickets, and he, on his surveillance around the island, he also has a copy of the ordinance. cars that are parked in places they shouldn't, things like that. He'll be kind of sprinkling tickets to people outside of when people know the standard time that the parking is being attended to.
That's excellent.
There's a bit of whack-a-mole going on in terms of people figuring out.
No, I know.
So he's gonna
I've
kind of sprinkle in between.
Quite
Okay,
honestly.
other agenda items that are on there. GEI South Shore vote on the funding, but we're gonna wait until the FEMA answer is provided.
It'll be here by next meeting, we'll have the money.
Yep, and then the workshop, probably a workshop will happen after that, but hopefully before July 4th.
And actually, I think on that meeting, it shouldn't take long. We might want to have a contract on the wildfire mitigation. So from the contractor, may want to approve a contract on that so they can get started. We should know about the money also by then.
And Carol, was that funding for just Shabig or Shabig and Long?
So $86,000 for Shabig and Long combined, and we're not really differentiating. They're just doing the whole thing as one block.
Gotcha.
And so,
So do you think June 4th, that would be available?
yeah,
Okay,
I'll know better, but yeah, I think so.
maybe, see.
It won't take long. I mean, I would assume if we, normally those kinds of things don't take a ton of time.
Okay. All right, and then the last agenda item to be added, June 4th, we'll be talking about the GP cog email that I sent to all you folks today. And Bob and Aldrich and Vika will put forth a proposal.
Right.
And that's all I have for future agenda items in addition to the ongoing list. And yes,
Bob's last meeting.
that will be Bob's last meeting.
It will be? There's no other meeting in June?
No, because then the following Tuesday is elections,
Oh, and they're
and then once the
immediately-
people are
I
elected,
was thinking
then
it was the
fall.
fiscal year.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought that too, but
Huh,
I was wrong.
lucky dog.
Would entertain a motion to enter executive session.
I know we're having one.
Sorry, we're not doing, there's a couple of things. Personnel related.
I can't make a motion without a purpose.
Personnel, same thing's written on the agenda.
Personnel, okay, I'll make that motion to enter an executive session, relative to, MRSA 6A personnel.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Liza. All in favor? Okay.
Yep.
So we can take a second while Chris packs up her stuff.